Here's the agenda.
All right, you're live.
Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 meeting of the Wareham Finance Committee. It's 6:30 p.m. and we are in room 27 of Wareham Town Hall and on Zoom and Wareham Media. And I'd like to call this meeting to order and call the roll. Jerry Stefanski.
Here.
Jody Smith.
Here.
Andrea Picarelli. Here. And Heidi Churchill.
Here.
And myself, Norma Scoggin. There are 5 of us here. Missing are Brianna King and Alan Slavin, but we do have a quorum. And we will begin with the first item on the agenda, which is approval of the March 5th, 2025 minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye, or excuse me, yes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we don't need to do a roll call because we don't have anyone participating remotely. And speaking of remote participation, it's my understanding that the authorization to do remote and Zoom meetings has been extended for another 2 years. Just so you know. All right, so the next item on the agenda is presentation and discussion regarding town meeting articles 1, 2, and 5 by Judith Whiteside. She was rushing home to get sign on by Zoom, and I think she is not here yet unless she's under the name Catherine Harrelson, which I assume not. So we will defer those discussions, and we'll start with item E, which is presentation and discussion regarding town meeting Article 16, rodenticide. It is a citizen's petition, and if Jessica Bell would please step forward to this seat, I would appreciate it.
I'm just going to promote you, and then you're going to have to rejoin.
Okay.
And we're doing a little bit of technical work here for her to be able to share her PowerPoint that she's prepared.
And when you're in the panels, you should be able to hit share. Yeah.
All right. And if you would please just step forward so we can see you. And I'm going to ask you to start with just identifying yourself for the record and telling us very briefly what it is that you are asking for.
Thank you. Should I sit or?
Yes, please.
Thank you for meeting with me this evening. My name is Jessica Bell. I live in Onset, and I created a citizen's petition, now Article 16, to phase out the use of second-generation anticoagulant rodenticide, which people refer to as SGAR because anticoagulant is a tricky word to say. So briefly to go over what anticoagulant rodenticide is, it's a secondary application because the first application rats became immune to. So secondary essentially means it is highly lethal. And the way it's set up is it is stored in station houses that store approximately like 10 blocks. 1 block equals 10 rats, So essentially 1 bait station can kill up to 10 rats, not including the ones that go back to eat them. So the poison it essentially inhibits vitamin K, so it prevents the blood from clotting. So you're not able to fight diseases, not able to bruise. It causes a weakened immune system. So when you see like the coyotes and the foxes with mange, it's an indication that they ate a poison rat because their immune system isn't able to fight it off. So the issue with this is the first ingestion is lethal, but where the tricky part comes in is it takes anywhere from 3 days to weeks. Even they're developing an immunity where it's taking almost like a month or 2 for some rats. They're known as super rats. They are actually studying this in Wareham right now. We have super rats that are becoming immune to secondary rodenticide because it's just nature always wins. So I have here MDAR came out to my property to test a rodent, and the lethal range of escards for birds of prey, i.e. hawks, owls, is 100 parts per billion. The test results within here, MDAR just sent me this, is 2,000 times the lethal amount for a bird of prey to ingest, just with this tiny little rat in the Ziploc bag. Sorry, I included that. So since the escargot bait has a delayed impact, the rats continue to eat them, and they grow slower and slower, so they're really easy. It's just like low-hanging fruit for owls. They're like, this is a slow rat, I'm going to eat it, and they end up being poisoned. So I'm asking that Wareham should ban the use of escargot rodenticide application on municipal, residential, and public properties. I've included 2 bills that are within the State House, hopefully to ban escar use by January 2027. I've also included towns that have banned escars on town property, and then towns with petitions to ban. And Wareham's on there, so it's awesome. Rat poison equals wildlife poison equals more rats. So this is actually a coyote from my yard. Coyotes can eat 1,800 rats and mice a year. Rodents are 75% of their diet. So you can see he had mange. That's what ended up killing him. And then the Norwell fox, he became pretty famous in, I believe, 2024, 2025. Foxes eat 2,920 mice a year, 1,000 rats. So that's more than a bait station set up in like 4 different houses, just with 2 animals. So that's when I say, less prey less wildlife equals more rats. That's why. The screech owl was actually in Cape. Screech owls can eat 4,000 a year. That's why owl houses are a great alternative to rodenticide. Another goober, red-tailed hawks. He's actually the cat in Beverly just passed away from eating a poisoned rat in February of 2025. The screech owl passed away in 2024, but that red-tailed hawk in the middle is undergoing treatment. He's getting vitamin K infusions. And they've been testing red hawks, and 100% of them have come back with rodenticide poisoning. 100%. So it would lead to better pest control if we ban this. So the solution is, because people are like, okay, I don't want to use rat poison, but I don't know how to go back. Sorry, I'm not technical. There we go. So what do? So the first thing is you have to exclude the rodents. It would be like you breaking out in hives and being prescribed Benadryl, but what am I allergic to? You shouldn't have rats in your yard to begin with. So sealing up holes in your foundation. If you have trash all over the yard, pick it up. Wood piles, make sure your trash bins are closed. In Somerville, they actually modified their trash bin lids, and they had a 60% reduction in rat population. And you can use spearmint sprays, cayenne pepper, and eventually once you get to excluding, then starving them. If you're not feeding them, they won't be on your property. So like bird feed, if you love the birds, it's like the bird seed's got to go because rats love it. Garden waste, garbage, then target the rodents. If you're still seeing rats and mice around, put down some snap traps. You can use CO2 electronic traps. They now have birth control for rats, which is going great with research. And then last resort, you can use gluten meal or vitamin D3. And the vitamin D3 is in a similar chamber as is the escars now. They just go in but it doesn't lead to secondary poisoning for birds of prey, but it does poison dogs. So that's why it's that is the absolute last. I know I'm limited on time, so I'll be quick. I did a Q&A with Banner Pest Control. They're North Shore, and they gave up escar rodenticide in 2024. And I just asked them questions because I want to make sure that pest control companies, we need them. I want them to still make money. And I said, hey, with giving this up, what happened? What's the consequence? Because it's all going to come my way. I need to have answers. And so what he's using number one, he's going on to properties and he's like, why do you have rats? First off, are they coming into your house? Let's put wire mesh in your foundations. So it's kind of like the exclusion methods that they're using. And then I asked, why did he discontinue using it? And a lot of municipalities in North Shore are banning it. They're like, you can't use it on here. The residents just don't like it. So he was kind of forced to switch methods. I asked, what has your success rate since banning it? And he's saying he's happy to say he has experienced no drawbacks since moving away from it, and his business has increased exponentially. He's like, I have 5 guys right now, I need more. He's like, calls are going off the hook because he's having wildlife companies put him down as an alternative method. Like, hey, call Banner Pest. We have only 2 in Cape Cod. So this could be, I own a business. We need alternative methods in Cape. I called a pest control company that didn't use SCARs, and they made a lot of money off me this summer. So people, there's a need for it. Public response, some people are iffy about it. Understandable, save the wildlife, organic translate to expensive or ineffective. I asked him, how much more expensive is it a month using the vitamin D3 for infestations? He's saying $10 more a month, which is nothing. It's 2 coffees. And I asked him what the future of SCARs are, and he's saying it's down the pipeline. We won't be using it much longer. He was like, so even if I never loved the thought, but he eventually had to switch methods because he sees it coming in the pipeline. This goober was at New England Wildlife, didn't make it. So if we vote this in, what does this mean? And I actually invited Laura in on the call because she is the pioneer of this. She started the home rule petition in Arlington to get this passed when the bald eagle passed, when he was poisoned. So municipalities have the right to prohibit pesticides on their own public properties, as well as petition the state for permissions to ban on private properties in their borders through the passage of home rule petition at the State House. And I adopted similar language to kind of piggyback off of the 2 bills that are currently in the State House, just to show support and get the governor's attention, like, hey, town, like, we're talking about this. Like, I think it's time for us to adopt this. And yeah, that completes it. I think, it took 10 years to ban DDT, and it was similar language. Hey, like, people are getting cancer, the wildlife, it's like the sun, it's the stress, wildlife are dying because of deforestation and freeways, like every other excuse but DDT itself. And I feel like we're kind of hearing a similar language as to the opposition of banning this. And I think we have the opportunity. I mean, so many towns are doing this, especially in Cape. And I've had a lot of success, talking to the Conservation Commission here. Someone emailed me last night and was like, I'm so happy that this is being presented to the board because she's been seeing this firsthand. So yeah, that's my goal. So I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I really do. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that very thorough presentation. Can you sign out of Zoom so that your face will come back up on the screen
Stop.
for our audience?
I'm so not good at this. There we go.
I was on Do Not Disturb. Okay, I think we've got Judy. Excuse me. Sorry.
She's up there, yeah.
Yeah, if you can promote Judy to panelist, please.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
So we normally ask people questions when they come and present to us, and I imagine people on the committee have a few
Yeah.
questions. So I want to open up for that.
I do, I always do.
Nice, good.
I do, I did, I just gave it up, my pesticide license,
Okay.
which includes these, but people don't realize when they say pesticide license, it could be herbicides,
Yeah.
all those things.
Yep.
But a big part of that is doing IPM.
Yep.
I don't know if you knew that when the state tests you for your pesticide license,
Yep.
you have to be very well aware of it, but you did
And
answer
that's
some of my,
integrated pest management.
yeah, that's the alternative stuff,
Yep.
using chemicals,
Mhm.
basically. Can you buy this over the counter?
That was in the presentation. I know I had 5 minutes. That is a huge problem. Yes, you can buy it online. Not in all states, but in Massachusetts right now, which is another hurdle that you could buy Escars online and just put the vape box out in your yard.
Okay, but I couldn't walk in Home Depot, for example, I'm not saying.
You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to
Well,
be able to.
if they
because
know
it's
they're not
outlawed.
supposed to, they won't have it, I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure.
Yeah, they're not supposed to carry it because it was made, and Laura may have more information on this, but it was made illegal a few years ago. But I know that it can be purchased online, and that's just an additional undertaking that has to be addressed as well,
And
for
by,
sure.
you said it was made illegal. Do you mean against company policy
So
for
it
Home
was,
Depot?
no, so it was made illegal. I believe the pesticide state board passed, or the EPA, I'm looking as if Laura's here, that homeowner, only pesticide companies can place like the bait traps, like the put out in the yard. Like no longer, the homeowner should no longer be able to do so. It is illegal
Illegal
because
for-
it's dangerous.
For individuals, I got you.
Correct.
Okay,
So it needs to be a licensed professional that's setting that up.
other,
Uh,
A lot of kids they look like Legos. There was so many kids being poisoned by it before they changed the laws.
yeah, I thought it was interesting, your presentation, just a little bit, and I do a lot of things you said. I don't use any more chemicals than I have to.
Yeah,
I never did.
you're rare though, to be honest, because I personally have dealt with a few pest companies coming out to my property because Wareham has a lot of rats. And there's a lot of bait stations out, and we still
There's
got a lot of rats.
a lot of towns having rat problems.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I brought you a little handout if you wanna take
Ooh.
it, that this came from a health department. This
Yeah.
isn't something I put together.
Yeah.
You might find interesting. It's all the things you said kind of narrowed down.
Yeah,
I think it was a good point you made, that it really doesn't cost any more money. And it's
Yeah.
just as effective, because that's always been, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. That's just not effective, and people don't realize, in some things it's not. If you use chemicals in the water for, which again, it works much better than pulling them out, because they tend to grow back much quicker with chemicals. But I think, I wasn't sure how, when you first put, you did a great job with this tonight. I saw
oh,
you.
thank you.
I saw
bought
you
the
in front of
first
the
one. Did I even
selectmen.
see- Good grief.
No, the selectmen, you struggled a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I thought it
get
was a
some help.
different assignment. Yeah, I mean,
But,
I've been
you
prepared.
did a great job
but
tonight.
Yeah, I
and
appreciate it.
I think it's a good idea. I just had a red-tailed hawk eating a squirrel up in the tree a couple days ago.
Nice.
So I see it all the time. I worked on a golf course and saw those things constantly. So I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
It's just working, and if you have an infestation, there are other options like the D3, or which a lot of there are conservation groups that are reluctant because a dog dogs can be poisoned by it, but there are other options.
The biggest thing, and this is kind of getting off track, is preventive.
Yes.
If that sheet, you'll see that, I mean, in the wintertime, we put mothballs in all the sheds, mint, under them and things like that to keep the things away. Whether it could be skunks, they don't like smell of a lot of these things. So,
Yeah.
I think, hopefully the state passes it.
There's
so I'm gonna get back to that, but is there any other comment or question?
I just have one. Have you gotten any pushback?
Oh yeah, you betcha.
And
Like,
one of the
personally?
reasons,
Well, pest control companies, and I get it. They're like, you're coming after my job. I'm like, no, I own a business. I want you to eat. If you eat, I eat. I think there's room. I actually think they can make more money. I'm like, hey, why don't we go for coffee? Because you could make more money. Because I personally had 3 pest control companies come out. 2 of them said bait stations. I said, no, they don't work. My neighbor uses them, and I have a rat infestation, and they're dying in my basement. They don't work, and it's sad. And they were X amount, and the guy I hired was 5 times the amount, and I have not had rats since, and he did not use that. But he came in and he put like the steel mesh and snap traps. It's just, it's instant, and and I paid exponentially more for that. So I think it's, and training too, when I spoke with Banner Pest Control, and I've spoken to a few of them, and they're like, I don't want to go on this petition because I know I'll get pushback from they've been very upfront. They're like, I don't want the pushback from my colleagues, because the Banner Pest Control said he was trained on escars. It was a one size, put the bead stations out. It's like a Netflix subscription. It's like 45 a month. Here you go. I'll refill it once a month, like every X amount of feet. You can have 2 or 3 set up, and it's one approach, but I'm like, why do I have rats? And they were like, you feed all of the birds. You're dropping like $100 at Tractor Trailer Supply a week. You got to stop doing that. So my birds are happy, but not happy, but I'm happy that I don't have rats.
The birds have other sources of food.
Yes.
But you know, another thought along those is, you know, to hold a pesticide license, you gotta take so many CEUs every winter. That's something that the state should, because they require it.
Right.
You know,
Well,
do IPM a little bit more, you know, because it's,
I want to focus right now on what the town can or
Yeah,
can't do.
yes.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, just to kind of round out the presentation, do you have a sense of the number of animals like squirrels, fox, whatever, that are die because of ingesting this, say in Wareham in a year? Because that's the opposite of what you're saying. You know, you want to prevent that. But
Yes.
what is that number?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically in Wareham because I haven't partnered with any groups in Wareham. I've partnered with Wild Care in Dennis. They said anywhere from between 100 to 200 injured. Never mind deceased. It's hard to find the deceased ones, to be honest. And then Laura, she started Save Arlington Wildlife. I mean, the conservation groups that I'm speaking with, and the wildlife rehabbers, they're seeing hundreds annually. And they have to inject. It's the vitamin K infusion that hopefully will get them up and going. But yeah, it's I don't have an exact number, and that's a good question, Wareham. That's a really good question, and I will do my darnest to
It's
find
more
out.
than one, but we don't know the top.
Yeah, exactly.
It
It's
might-
a lot.
That
It's a
question
lot.
may come up.
I personally
Yes.
saw it. 3 of those animals in the slides were in my yard, and I'm in onset. I'm like, what is going on? And I was calling animal control. I'm like, why are these animals so sick? And she was like, they're eating poison rats.
Mm.
So, you know, that just, yeah.
So here's my question. I do understand a town can ban something on its own property and what the municipal maintenance is allowed to put out. I assume they're in charge of pest control to the extent we do something like that. I guess my concern is there's some mention of the state preempting in this area. The state does regulate what poisons can and can't be used and what methods can and can't be used. If the state has preempted it, we can't control what anybody else does. We could have our own policy within the town to not use this, which would be a start. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that's what some of the towns have done. But have any of the towns had the AG passed a bylaw and had the AG say, yes, you can make this limitation?
Could I invite Laura to speak? Because she
Yes,
was the
if she knows the
first-
answer to that question, I would like to hear.
Is that her raising her hand?
Yes.
I'm not tech
So
savvy.
So, and would you state your name, please?
I think she's muted.
you're muted.
Yes.
Laura Kiesel?
Okay, and that's spelled Kiesel.
Yes.
I'm doing that for our minute taker. Can you answer that question? Have any towns been allowed by the AG to pass a bylaw that prohibits the use of escars by private citizens?
No, so we aren't allowed to, by right, ban it on private property. What Arlington did in 2022, and we started out like Jessica with one warrant, it got split up between the select board's vote and before it went to town meeting, where one was a public lands ban resolution, so on our own municipal properties, which municipalities do have the right to do, but the second one was a home rule petition resolution. So Arlington became the first municipality to also submit a home rule petition to the state house, to the state legislature, asking to ban it on private property. Since we submitted that in 2022, a half a dozen other municipalities have followed suit, including 3 on the Cape, Eastham, Orleans, and Wellfleet, I believe are the 3 Cape towns. And I know another half a dozen are considering their own home rule petitions this town meeting season.
And has the legislature approved those home rule petitions?
No, I mean, you may be aware that in general, state bills have an uphill climb. I think thousands get submitted every state legislative session and only like a very tiny percentage, less than 5% pass. Our home rule petition, along with Newton's home rule petition, did pass out of committee, and 99% of home rule petitions die in committee. So that was actually a big deal and made the news because it did show that the state was responsive, was hearing a lot from constituents about these home rule petitions. Now that was when there were only 2, but this upcoming season there will be 8. So the idea is both for our own individual communities, we're doing this, but we're also coming together, different communities submitting it, because precedent has shown in the State House, when they get enough home rule petitions on a particular issue, that they will often independently revise their state laws because they're hearing enough from constituents across the state via these home rule petitions that they want a change in these regulations. Like there was a change on natural gas piping, and there was another one on renewable energy that happened because I think 5 or 6 municipalities submitted home rule petitions.
Right.
And now there are 2 state bills that were just proposed in January in response to the home rule petitions that would prohibit SCARs on the state level.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
That does.
Yeah, we also
answers
did
my question.
another thing with our home rule petition, that we would have pest companies register whatever they're using, whether it's SCARs, just so that we can follow that. And the AG has that pending, so it's like in a legal limbo until our home rule petition passes. But in addition to SCARs, we would be allowed to track what's being used and where.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. I guess what I want to make sure you're aware of, so this,
Yes.
we're not going to vote tonight.
Yeah.
When we do vote, we'll vote whether to recommend to town meeting to approve this. I think what we may be looking at is something that would be viewed as a resolution, which is a step, I think, in the direction that you're trying to go. Because if we do, if that is the result, and I'm not saying one way or another yet, because we don't know,
Yeah.
that would be, first of all, it would be an indication to the town, we should be looking at banning these products on town property if we're using them now. And we might be pursuing a home rule petition at another point. But in the meantime, there is the state legislation that could decide it one way or the other. We just don't know. So I wanted you to know that we are very happy to hear your presentation. I think you're talking about an important issue. We may or may not have the power to do what you would like us to do, but there are other steps in that direction.
I have one additional question.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the impact to yourself as a
Mhm.
homeowner, and obviously the town, we can consider what the impact is to the town, but what about to our business owners who are operating? We have a chocolate factory, we have a crouton factory. If we were to ban this, if Rochester were to do this, CMAS, where they are constantly in rat control mode. And so my concern would be, what are businesses where they can't necessarily use the same methods you can because they're in leased buildings, so they can't modify them. What's the impact to a big tax base?
Good question.
I left out commercial properties because I think with the information I have right now, I'm not able to answer that question confidently, to be honest. That's why I actually left out commercial properties, because I think there is something to be said that I don't have the answers for that. I know that there's an organization called RATS, and California banned SGARs, and they have great information on, and I bet Laura's like, I'm raising my hand. They have great information as to, what restaurants can do instead of the bait stations. But again, if vitamin D3 is doing the same thing, why wouldn't we just switch that out if it's not poisoning the birds and the owls and the,
I don't see where you have limited this to, you're talking about residential, right?
I'm talking about residential and municipality property.
Okay, I don't see that language, but I'll admit to just having scanned over it very briefly.
Yeah, I thought private
Can
property
I
was
make-
It
inclusive.
says all private
Okay,
and
that
public
is,
property.
so can I make an
You can't.
I can't,
You
okay.
cannot.
Okay.
That's.
Then I'll
is-
have more information for your question then.
Yeah.
That's my homework.
I mean, I think that's that's an important point, and it's, this may end up being tabled for a little bit longer or something like that to refine it a bit.
Okay,
But just so you know, public and private includes private.
gotcha.
Private could
Thank
be
you for
commercial.
thank you
and
for
that's a
bringing
really
that up.
important point.
And Laura and I are gonna have to have a little powwow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank
I
you
appreciate
very,
it so
very
much.
much.
Thank you very much.
And
And thank
you're-
you for this. I
You're welcome to
appreciate it.
stay, but we will not keep you against your will.
Thank you.
All right.
Next,
Next.
change the wording on
You can't amend
town
it on the
meeting
floor?
floor.
Oh, and possibly on the floor, but yes, but not before. All right, so the next items on the agenda are for Judith Whiteside, our select board chair, will present Articles 1, 2, and 5, which are very routine matters, but I think it's important that we always at least touch base on everything that we're gonna vote on, so Chair Whiteside, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Article 1 is these are all standard articles that go into every spring town meeting, annual town meeting, and the election of officers. In that article, the recitation is whatever elected officials are on the ballot. And so that information is already published, and the ballots won't be voted on until May 6th, which is after this meeting. But it is a standard part of the town meeting. Essentially, the town meeting doesn't, in fact, end until after all of the ballots are counted. Sounds weird, but that's a technicality. So it's a standard article.
All right.
Article 2, the recurring business, is allowing the town administrator to apply for and accept and go into contracts, authorizing the town treasurer collector to go into compensating balance agreements, and spending interest on interest earned on other items as outlined there. Again, they're very, very standard articles. They usually are actually taken up on the consent agenda because there really isn't anything to discuss.
All right.
On the occasional reports, number 5, usually or all zoning articles, there is a planning board report. From time to time, there are other reports given to the town meeting. If, for instance, the bylaw review committee were not able to have completed their work, or if their deadline wasn't until October, they might give an interim report to the town meeting to let people know where they are in the process. So again, it's a standard article. You would hear from the capital planning committee after a presentation about the capital planning, the capital items being requested. So they're all slam dunks, really.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions at all? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Right.
All right, now the main act for the evening would be item F on the agenda, presentation and discussion regarding special town meeting articles on town bylaws. And I didn't specify a number because we don't have the numbers yet because the special has not closed yet. But the committee was ready, and as you know, we always have a lot of things to get through, so this was one that we could check off our list.
You're right.
Yes. So if you would, please, both of you, state your name for the record and tell us what you have for us today.
Good evening, folks. Good to see everyone again. My name is Julie Moran. I'm the chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. To my left is Jared Frederickson, who's our vice chair. Jillian Morton has a conflict around the corner hearing, so she, who is our clerk, will not be with us tonight. You have been provided with kind of the key 2 documents at this point, which is the additions and deletions to the bylaws. This has been a process that began several years ago. There was a bylaw review committee who made a lot of progress towards this project, which I'll talk about in a minute. And our committee was constituted in this past fall, and we have moved forward with that. So this is really our charge. Judith Whiteside started off the group with the charge, which is to support the provisions of the charter in our bylaws, make sure they're consistent with the bylaws. Massachusetts allows municipalities to establish laws that govern local matters. So this is really kind of our blueprint for how we manage our lives here in town. And then to provide administrative procedures to restrict or regulate certain activities, all of which must be approved by town meeting and then ultimately by the Attorney General. These bylaws, of course, are part of a larger body of laws that we all have in the town. We have the zoning bylaw, Conservation Commission, waterways, animal control. So this is really just one part of what governs how we comport ourselves in town and establishes penalties, violations, fines for violations, and really a whole body of law. The genesis of the committee arose out of the request of the select board and some town officials, because what had happened over time is there were a series of bits and pieces of the bylaws that were worked on. No one really had taken a holistic, comprehensive view to say, do these make sense? Are they still valid? Are they consistent with the state law? Do they make sense?
Are they repetitive?
Yes. So we really dove in, if you will. Again, the good work started by our prior committee. And these are really some of the things that our focus was, which was to look at what sections, articles have become obsolete over time. You'll see one, which is, last time I looked, we weren't putting casks or allowing sheep to travel in the road, still sitting in there in the bylaws. So the other one was, there are a whole body of Massachusetts law that cover, and we are required to comply with the Massachusetts law as to many of the activities that we undertake. So what we wanted to make sure is the references in the law within the bylaws consistent, and even more important, if in fact the bylaws are recited for larger or smaller versions in the statute, we didn't really feel that it was particularly necessary in some instances to repeat that. So we had looked at those and had made a list, which you will see on what we can remove from the bylaws. There were also some changes in town practices. We have different department heads over the years, all have different ways of operating. So we looked at that. We met with all of the heads of departments, sent them copies, had meetings, and really got some great feedback. So these bylaws do reflect feedback from all department heads, basically. We also looked at were there some, what we found is there were some articles that were approved at prior town meetings, somehow didn't make it into the bylaws. So we spent a lot of time shaking the dust off of 2008 town meeting votes, and so there was quite a bit of that. Also, there were additional sections that we added which we thought were appropriate to clarify, to take care of changes in what we do and how we do it. So we did add some of that. Then we looked at sequencing, pagination, numbering. We had many instances where it went Division 3, Article 1, and what happened to Article 2 and 3, and we were in Article 4. So there was quite a bit of that as well. And so the outcome of this project still remains a work in progress. Ultimately, I think we may be coming back to, right now they're in division and articles. We've moved around quite a bit of the text, but we think that there may be one more step to really make them much easier for people to research, to find what they're looking for more quickly. So we'll likely have some more work around that. And then what we have finally done, which is really, we're in the process now of meeting, we met with town council, who had some feedback, we've met with the select board that had some feedback. So we're also looking at clarity, does this now make sense as we read it? So we're really doing some more fine tuning, and all in advance of the April 1 deadline for the warrant. So what you're seeing, you'll see, I think this is, you're looking at, I think we're in,
Version
version
4.
4 at this point. So it tells you kind of how far we've come. So what I thought I would do is, what we've done we've had by the way, we've had 2 meetings, public hearings, have received some good feedbacks, and some of which is reflected in what you have in front of you. We also, there is a earth removal bylaw that is in the bylaw currently. We have, the committee has made a determination that bylaw is complex, could use some further study. We are looking at other towns and looking at what their bylaw looks like, particularly those towns that have a lot of earth removal, a lot of agricultural work, much of which is in our surrounding communities. So we're integrating that. We're setting up some meetings with the folks, the stakeholders, if you will, cranberry growers, town officials, and we expect that we will be seeing you at the fall town meeting with a new and improved, shall we say, earth removal bylaw. So that is the only one that you'll ultimately see in the warrant, the clean version, which we really haven't done anything with. One thing that we have done, and we're moving, I think, towards that in other parts of the bylaw, is what we are doing is, and we've done it in the instance of the waterways bylaws, the waterway regulations, which is about 14 pages in the current bylaws. So with the advice and the support of council, and with Gary Buckminster's approval, we are, instead of reciting all of the text, we are providing a link in the new bylaw. And ultimately, there are 2 other bylaws that are under review right now for changes to animal control and the Wetlands Protection Act. So those 2, Josh Barity, Gary, are thinking maybe by the fall we'll have a new version, but that may also end up being, because of the voluminousness of those, they may end up being a link as well, but we will, we'll wait to see what happens on that. So I am going to, Jillian usually is my deletion queen, but if you'd like, I can give you kind of some high level on the deletions. In the interest of time, what I'd like to do is just give you overview of why the various reasons why this document came to be. I've already talked about the waterways, which eliminates about 10 pages of my discussion. So much of what we did, first of all, there were quite a few sections which were recited almost verbatim in Mass General laws. So though in some of those instances, you will see that we did delete those. There were some also, as I said earlier, obsolete. Sheep in the road, kite flying in the road.
Near horses.
Yes. And there were some things, for instance, Mass General Laws has a statute around handicap parking and handicap accessibility, ADA as we know it. So we didn't feel the necessity to recite the statute within the bylaws. So that is another example. We also found that there were some areas of the bylaw where at the time it made sense, which is we hereby establish a committee. We hereby establish the 3rd historic district. They're already established in the bylaw 10 years ago. So we did a lot of work around that. We also looked at one of the additions that we made, which Jared will talk about, is we felt it was important to highlight some of our committees that really are some of our more prominent, more active committees. So you'll see that there's some of that. We didn't forget the Finance Committee, because you were always there, but we've added some of the committees. And we really, we created a text composition term and then powers. So there, it's pretty consistent. So someone needing to look at that, find that, can easily find it and understand. There was also, again, some aspects that were not being followed. A good example is house numbering. Our town assessor is now in charge of house numbering. There were about 8 sections of house numbering that were not being followed, and in fact, were not consistent with the 911 bylaws that came out 12 years ago. And frankly, in the 2018 town meeting, we had approved all of those. So we took out, we kind of did an exchange. We took out those that were not really being followed, and then instead inserted those that are still, that are being followed now. So those were kind of some of the things that we thought were really important. There's quite a bit of repetitiveness within the bylaws. A good example is the severability validity clause, which says that to the extent any paragraph, sentence, anything is inconsistent, is preempted by state law, then that will cover it. That will be what we will follow. So there must have been 8 versions of a severability validity clause. So what we did, you'll see in the deletions, we recited all of those, but we have now created a comprehensive severability deletion that says for all of the bylaws, this is the severability clause that will apply, which cut down about 6 pages. One other thing that we note that times have changed. So one of the things that we did, which you don't really see here, but you'll see in the final, is we looked at gender neutral language. So we did work through that as well. Another term is select board. The bylaws currently say Board of Selectmen. We have changed all of those, and you'll see in the deletions to select board. So those
Isn't
kinds
that-
of things.
Isn't that required by state law now to use
Yes.
gender neutral language?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So this just is
Exactly.
another way of making it consistent with
Exactly,
state law.
exactly, yep. And that's, I'm just seeing what else. Street rules, as I said, there were many street rules that were not being followed. According to the chief of police, fall under general laws about disturbing the peace. And there was a lot of that was listed, but according to the chief of police, it all follows under several big headings under Massachusetts law. So they felt comfortable deleting those. What else? So that was, otherwise, one of the things that you don't see here, but you'll see it in the final, is I made sure that we had created some definitions to cover the entire bylaw. So what I did do throughout the bylaws, what we did is we made sure that the definitions carried through. We made sure that the numbering was correct, hopefully. So we did, those are not here in front of you. You'll see them in the final, but we didn't feel it was that you were necessarily that interested in how we changed section 1 to 2 or thereabouts. I think, what else? The other, just another example of outdated, you'll see in the final bylaws that we have, on the advice of council, have left in all of the penalties by different, for different types of actions, penalties for violation. Who the enforcement officers are. On advice of council, David said, let's leave all those numbers in. So you will see that when you look at the clean, that they all are listed. But one of the sections that we did eliminate is at the very end of the bylaws was a chart which had fines, most of which were obsolete, incorrect, inconsistent with Massachusetts law. So we made the decision to eliminate that table completely and to integrate within each section the fines, the enforcement folks, all of that. And again, Derek Sullivan, our town administrator, also approved that. So, and I think those are kind of the highlights of the deletions. Questions? It's a lot.
I found
It's a lot.
I'll admit to not having read every word of what you sent us. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm more familiar with the bylaws probably than some people anyway, but I found the explanations to be nice and clear and very
Good,
helpful. And
good. That's
I
good
just
to
went
know.
through and made sure I understood every one of them.
Good,
I think if
perfect.
everyone does that, we'll be fine.
Good, good. Okay. And then I'm going to turn this over to Jared, who's just going to run through the additions, and feel free to do high level.
Yeah, sure. So I think every one of the additions we made, there's 10 in total. I think each of them, they all come back to a couple of different things. So there are 3 of them, for instance, that all they do is they clarify existing rules and processes for committees. So we have one that, not just for committees, but rules and processes in general. We have one, for instance, that it just clarifies the warrant process. It doesn't change anything, it just outlines exactly how the town meeting warrant process exists now, makes sure it's in the bylaws, clearly stated, preventing any confusion. We also have 2 that are just procedural, having to do with committee processes, making sure they're in line with Mass General laws.
Open meeting law,
Yeah,
for
open
one.
meeting law specifically.
Right.
Number 2, we have a few that are, I think, clarifying, well, it's just simplifying things, I guess, and Julie already went over this, but one, for example, is the severability clause that we put in, having it just in one place instead of having that scattered throughout in different places. Definitions section, same thing, instead of having definitions scattered throughout the bylaws, this allows one place where you can find definitions of specific terms, and it can be added to later as well, without having to be put in, whatever relevant bylaw they would previously have thought to put it in, I guess. There are 2 that, well, they just clarify existing boards, I guess. So it's the Board of Health and the Wareham Redevelopment Authority specifically. It just lays out what the boards do, the composition of the boards, powers and duties of the boards. Again, this isn't really changing anything, but it's just laying out these boards as they exist now and actually putting them into the town bylaws so that I think it just makes a lot of things easier. And lastly, we have a few that are, as Julie explained before, things that were already approved by town meeting but didn't make their way in. She talked about housing numbers, that's one of them, that's one of the ones we have adding here. And that is just putting in place the house numbering system that we adopted in 2018 at town meeting, but it's for some reason or another never actually made its way in. So what we're doing now is we're adding that in here just to make sure that we have it in the bylaws. I guess that's all I got. But if anybody has any questions about additions.
There's just one more that I did want to highlight, which we've just added, which is in many towns, anyone who's received the letters back from the AG relative to changes. And sometimes the version that comes back, it's like, how did that numbering? What happened to that numbering? I thought it was this. Came back from the AG looking quite different. We've added a section allowing the town clerk to do editorial revisions to the bylaws. And by that I mean, and I'll just talk about what it is, they're non-substantive editorial edits, pagination, sections, lettering, spacing, formatting. It's the last one in your additions. And we have found that many towns have done this, and it really does help particularly when it comes back from the AG, and sometimes things have moved around. It does not allow the town clerk to make any changes relative to substantive matters. It also proposes that the town clerk provide them to the select board any changes for their approval before posting. So we have kind of a second set of eyes. I think will make our citizens more comfortable. So it's kind of a 2-step process as we're presented it. So that is, I think that's a recent addition, but I think it will help. I think it will help us future bylaw review committees, knowing that they do not, hopefully will not have to deal at the level we did on those kinds of issues. So we've added that at the suggestion of several of our citizens as well.
Wasn't that already added recently?
It wasn't,
It was never incorporated?
no, it was not voted on, so,
Okay.
so, yes. But it was certainly, it was discussed.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, questions, additions?
I'll just go, I'm glad to see you doing this because going into the bylaws could be the most frustrating thing in the world. And I said, well, maybe I need to be in the town charter. I said, well, it's not here. I'll go back to the bylaws and you look at the table of contents and you say, there's nothing,
Yeah.
it's gotta be here somewhere and, oh, this is,
And the table of contents is something that is not necessarily part of the bylaws, so once all of this is completed, then we'll be revising the table of contents.
yeah,
You
oh,
might be able to
so I
find
assume
something.
that, but it's very, when you're
Yes.
using it not with the, you know,
No.
what you have now, you just say,
Yeah.
oh, this is insanity.
Yeah.
To the point where I stopped looking for things. I mean, it's just,
You and lots of others, I think. So, okay.
Other questions or comments?
Good job.
yeah, thank you.
This is amazing, and I look forward to seeing the clean copy, non-draft all put together,
Yep.
because I think once that happens and you put it next to the disaster that has been our town bylaws, it's just gonna be a thing of beauty.
Yes.
Disaster, you're being kind.
What I will say is those stormwater management, I know there's some work being done. Those animal control, wetlands, we did not spend a lot of time with reformatting and all of that. So I
But you'll
mean,
renumber them, right?
yes,
Okay.
the numbers are now right, but they had a whole different version.
Mhm.
And given that is the only place where the bylaws, the rules and regs live in the bylaws, we made the editorial decision that we are not, executive decision, we're not gonna fool with those right now, so.
I think it makes a lot of sense to do this in stages, and the first stage being this really important cleanup
Yeah.
that gets rid of the stuff that really is long overdue for deletion. Thank you very much
Thank you.
Thank you.
for the rest of your evening.
To you.
Right. So that takes us, I believe, to item G, which is discussion of the schedule for review of the remaining and anticipated Springtown meeting articles. I sent you that sadly right before the meeting because I was still working on it through today. But essentially, I have spent a good bit of time in the last week talking to people who need to come before us and have not done so already, and making sure that we can fit them all into the times that we have left. We have 2 and possibly 3 people who can't make April 2nd, so we are not going to have a meeting on April 2nd unless it's an absolute emergency. And that would be something coming up for special town meeting that I'm just not anticipating at all right now. But my understanding is that what's shown on this chart that I sent out today, though the numbering may not be right and not all the numbering is there, these are the matters that we'll still need to look at. So,
Just on that CPC grants,
yes,
are there, that could be long if there's a lot of them.
there are 3, and 2 of them are the town. So, and I've talked to Wareham Land Trust about coming to talk about theirs. So I don't think that's going to be that much. That much time.
Sometimes they can be,
They absolutely can, but this is only, I think especially when we have, 3 or 4 outside grantees, that can take quite a bit of time. But I don't anticipate that to be the case.
so I know the Wareham, the land they wanna buy for 1 point something
Yes.
gazillion dollars, whatever it is. What are the other 2, do you know?
Anything
tricky? Any more playgrounds coming up?
No more playgrounds. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but
Okay,
they
I'm just
are-
curious.
I'll get that to you. They're much smaller matters though. So does anybody have any questions about the schedule? Other than that, I'll let Alan know we're expecting to hear his defense of his charter and bylaw amendments next week. But I assume he will be here. And we will have the school the schools do their budget, and Upper Cape also coming next week.
Yeah, I like the two schools together because they can kind of hear. I think for the schools, kind of hear what's going on from both sides, you know.
I always think it's better to group like things,
Yeah.
so that we think about them all at the same time.
It's a learning experience for both, some of the things, you know.
All right, any questions?
I was just gonna say, if push came to shove, if we had to have a meeting, I could get here if we just
One
started a
second.
little later.
Okay,
Yeah, even
All right.
30 minutes would be plenty.
all right, I will keep that in mind, but I'm feeling pretty good right now about this schedule. And the idea here is that our last meeting is the 16th, and we'll probably start doing some voting next week. But by then, we'll have a few more votes to do, and then the report has to be completed the next day because there's a Monday holiday. I've already started drafting the report, so I'm probably a quarter of the way through it now, which, a lot of it is just pulling in things from past years. It's not rocket science.
I mean, between the regular town meeting, especially, not a whole lot of anything there.
Right,
I
a lot
mean,
of it
this-
is the same every year.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah, I mean, that's reflected here. All right,
motion to adjourn.
wait,
Oh,
next meeting is next week.
Yep.
On the 26th at 6:30 in this room and on Zoom. And there's no unanticipated business, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. And it is 7:31.
Well, good.